I'd like to call the meeting to order. Oh. Do we have any resident input?
No.
Okay, and
don't we have to do the pledge and stuff?
Yeah. Do the pledge.
Can I have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
And I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter involving a specific teacher leading to possible separation from employment. Can I have a motion?
Motion, Ron. James, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll go into the other meeting. Just please make sure that your this meeting is muted before we go to the other one, or you exit. I don't have another meeting. Oh, that I know of.
Do I have another meeting? Steve, are you in the same spot?
There was a conversation about.
There should be another link to go to for the
Andrew, you didn't reply to you didn't affirm that. Okay.
Let me see if that takes me here.
Steve, check your email in a second, okay? Thank you. You know what?
Yeah.
I just did that too.
I need somebody to send me the email too. I don't have it.
After the meeting, and I said, think about it for a second. I clicked yes.
You're muted, Ron. It did the same thing when I switched from the other meeting to this one. It went right back to his account again.
You're still
Jacob Moron is not here.
on the board meeting account. I can hear your voices.
Oh.
Hold on. I wonder if that's me.
All of you, and I can see you too.
I just exit out of it.
Yeah, I think I can just exit it. Can you hear us now, Joel?
I can hear you, Betsy. Okay, now it's just us.
It's just the three of us. I like the map behind you, Joel.
Oh yeah, I'm in the basement. This is being recorded, so I'm going to be quiet now.
Me too. I'm going to mute. I do have a hope. I'm going to actually go get a drink.
Okay. Andrew, wrong meeting.
Wrong meetings. Ernie does have one cute dog picture.
He sure does. How do you get that dog to look right in the camera? I don't know.
I know it really is like a perfect shot.
Whoops. What did I do?
Are we back on recording? Okay.
Yeah. Is everybody back?
I don't see Cindy yet.
There she is.
I clicked on the wrong one again. Sorry. We had too many invitations.
Yeah. All right. Mrs. Strong, before we move into the consent agenda, would you mind if Mrs. Giangreco and I and Mrs. Burke and I updated the board about the status of things currently in the district?
No, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll start with we'll save the health stuff for a few minutes. But I received a few emails and some communications from some parents, which I always appreciate, being able to have a dialogue. And they were parents of some remote students that felt there's been a lot of changes with the fully remote students, and we kind of wanted to put that stuff into context. We do understand that there have been a lot of changes throughout the entire pandemic, but especially since the start of the school year. Because everybody will recall that we started the year fully remote. We had to balance the class list at that time due to make sure that everything was spread out equally across the grade levels. Then we went to hybrid. We had to make some changes again because at that point in time, many parents chose to continue fully remote. We had to pull a Maryvale teacher to be some of the remote teachers at the elementary level. And this caused some changes in teachers and schedules, particularly for the remote students. We then went back to remote because of the orange zone. And the principals at the elementary building changed some of the fully remote schedules because some of the fully remote parents requested that they were moved to the morning because they weren't happy necessarily with the afternoon session. So their schedules were changed so that they were being instructed in the morning. And now we're going to resume hybrid again. So we've made a lot of transition this school year. We're at this point, we're not sure of how many students, how many parents, I should say, will choose to have their students stay fully remote. Principals are going to be sending surveys to their hybrid families to help us determine, how many changes might occur come January. And throughout this whole thing, staffing dictates what we're able to do. School districts are staffed to conduct in-person learning. And when you're forced to do in-person and remote learning at the same time, you have to make certain choices. And then throw into that the different transitions that we've made throughout the school year. We understand that it's been difficult. It's been difficult on all of us as well. As I said in my letter to the community yesterday, we have to remember we're in a pandemic. There are people out there that are dying. There are people in it's happened in illness and death has happened in our district, with this disease. So it's hit close to home for some of us. And we're doing the best that we can with the resources that we have, the changing guidance, and the desire to accommodate parent requests. And we're doing all this with students in mind. Our students are at the forefront of what we're, the decisions that we're making, and none of these decisions are easy. None of them are, there's no playbook for these things. And we'll be the first to admit that we're not perfect. And, we look back at some of these things that have happened, and, we might have gone down path B instead of path A at certain points. But I mean, this is the first time that we're operating within a pandemic. And, I do appreciate when parents reach out to me, because, we're able to establish a dialogue, and, even if they don't agree in the end, at least I can explain to them and help them understand, the reasons behind some of these decisions, because none of them are made lightly. And, we realize that, every decision that's made in this pandemic is a series of compromises, because if you go one direction, then there are compromises to be made in the other direction. So it's difficult for sure. Ms. Giangreco, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. D'Angelo. I just first I wanted to thank our elementary staff, principals and staff, for really being able to launch that hybrid model very successfully on November 2nd. Kids were in the buildings, very organized, very planned. And then we hit that orange zone, which put us back to shift back to the remote model. And from hearing that, Mr. D'Angelo and I would talk and think, well, we are very poised to move back to the remote model because we did it so well from the beginning. Unlike other districts that were struggling a little bit to figure out how to even move into a remote model on November 15th, or when the orange zone came out. So our staff did a remarkable job in putting us in a very successful spot for our students on November 2nd. So I want to start there and just add a few more details to what you're talking about, Mr. D'Angelo. When we're looking at our phase in approach for our models and moving into phase 2, which is our hybrid model, there are a lot of different things that we had to take into consideration. And from the beginning, just making sure that it was clear to our parents and the community that it wasn't not going to look the same. It was going to look very different from the phase 1 fully remote model. And so I just wanted to add a few details into that when we're thinking about this and talking about it. There's so many different factors that come into play. But always understanding that every decision that we make, we prioritize the needs of our students. So when we had to pivot back to that fully remote instructional model, one, we were ready because we already did it. But then we had to think about our class sizes. So that was a major factor in making changes in order to balance classes. So for example, some classes maybe had 18 students that were in the hybrid, or let's full, like a whole 2 cohorts. And then the fully remote students class might have been 36 students. We had to work on balancing that. I know at the primary, they're at very large numbers of 50 students in a fully remote, the fully remote model that the parents selected for their children. So those were some considerations, and each school handled them a little bit differently because of the different numbers that they had. So the intermediate school prioritized their special ed and English language learner students that were demanding more academic needs, and moved them back to their beginning of their year teacher. So back with their original teacher during this temporary model or phase that we were in now currently. The building-based sub was then assigned to that class to assist and add additional layer of instructional support. So that's where we are currently at the intermediate. So that got our class sizes down to a more appropriate number for instructing our students. At the primary school, as Mr. D'Angelo said earlier, there were many requests from parents about the afternoon sessions. The students weren't engaged and they really wanted that AM session. There was teacher feedback on that, and our student numbers were really up there. So Based on all of those considerations, Mrs. Bailey and her team decided that they would go for an AM model, an AM instructional model, and break that group, let's say, of 50 students into 225 classes. So we would pair up our building-based sub, for example, would take that first grade fully remote students that the parents had already selected that model, and then the Maryvale teacher would take the other half. And those two, as currently today, work in unison, planning, preparing the same level of instruction together that all students would receive. So it really was more of a co-teaching situation, or is, but broken into two different sessions. So that would have resulted in some of our students receiving a third teacher, which would be the building-based sub. So while that is not desirable, and we certainly took all of that into consideration, we always, in the front of our mind, consider what is best for students. How do we prioritize our students' needs? Having a class of 50 students is probably not a good instructional decision to make that's good for students. So we knew that. So we had to get creative and think of other ways to go around that. An advantage to that is that our students were able to gain, currently are able to gain more instructional time, from 2.5 hours to 3 hours and 15 minutes. And again, the teachers co-plan together, work together to ensure that the consistency of instruction between those classes. But we, please know that every decision of this process, we prioritize the needs of our students, and we will continue to do so. We are in a pandemic right now, and these times are uncertain, and the situation's very fluid, and sometimes changes occur daily, and we understand that. We understand that it's hard, not only for parents and students, but us at the district level too. But from the beginning of phasing in this our hybrid instructional model, which is considered our phase 2 model, we had informed parents and community members along the way that this model would look different from the phase 1, the fully remote model, where all our students are receiving fully remote instruction all day. Some of the notable changes that we did, inform parents about were specific to student schedules would be changing, the potential of staffing to change based on the needs of balancing classes. We had more response than anticipated for the fully remote model after the town hall meetings, after the principals did present the phase 2 model. Parents did select to keep their child in the fully remote model. And as Mr. D'Angelo stated, and I'll say it again, and staffing is our #1 priority when we are in the hybrid model. We have to ensure that our buildings are staffed for the safety of all of our students and staff. It's our #1 priority. When we're leading a building as principals in a district, we always want to make sure of that. So I know that was communicated by the principals to our families as well, because in the event, we hadn't had to do it just yet, or maybe we did do it once, but we would have to pull our fully remote teachers to cover our on-site hybrid model students, because we can't leave students unsupervised. That would be a safety concern, and that would not be good for kids. So we wanted to make sure our parents were well aware of that prior to going into the hybrid model, that this has a potential, could happen, and it still could happen as we move back to our hybrid model on Monday. This is something that we're all talking about. This is in the forefront. Staffing is critical. Some districts aren't able to open because of staffing. It's not necessarily the students, it's the staffing. So that's something that we will be monitoring daily, and did in the hybrid model. And the principals, the elementary principals, did a really great job at that, making sure that everything was covered. This is, change is inevitable during this pandemic. We always want to put our students first and make decisions on what's best for them. Principals did a great job of developing inclusive committees of staff, parents, students, to aid in ensuring that we're doing the best for our children of Maryvale. So I know that the work and the commitment amongst our staff, amongst our families, and amongst our students has been remarkable. So I can't say enough about that. I do have to say that we did make a change as we were entering into the hybrid model about what teacher would be teaching the fully remote students. And, that is an example of us putting our students first, our children first in Maryvale. Instead of having a daily substitute teacher take on that role, we made that change to say, well, geez, let's put a certified Maryvale teacher in front of our students for our fully remote students that are selecting that model. So I know that in surrounding districts, that's not happening. And in some instances, it's a day-to-day sub, because subs are very hard to get right now. And that's a big concern for staffing for some of our larger districts moving into the hybrid model back into it. So I am proud to say that that is something that's rare, that I haven't heard that's happening often. So, and we do recognize the changing through multiple teachers can be a challenge for all of our families involved. We totally understand that. We're humble to that. I'm a parent myself, and I know that it is very difficult to deal with that. But we have the best of the best here in Maryvale, and know that no matter what student gets what teacher, all of our teachers are remarkable, and we uphold ourselves to that. So we're going to give the quality of education, the highest quality, to all of our students, regardless of who's in front of our children or our students. So moving into phase 2, the hybrid model changes the landscape for fully remote students. Parents did have the choice from the beginning to select the best model for their child, with the information to make this decision through multiple ways. Principals held town hall meetings at each school. Principals reached out to on their social media to say, please email me, call if you have questions, anything that you wanted to know about either selecting fully remote for your child, or moving into the hybrid model. So we did provide a lot of information prior to our parents being able to make this decision. I understand that some of the changes, like for teachers, for example, those kind of came at the later hour, possibly. But we do understand that. But we want to make sure that you know that we're making the best choices for students. That's our first and foremost priority. I'm just kind of reading through my notes a little bit. And moving forward, as we pivot back to the phase 2 model, we are going to survey parents. It's gone out. I believe it's headed out by the principals, if it hasn't gone out yet, for your choice of instruction for their child, so that we can lead to increase in the fully remote students. So we know exactly how many fully remote students we're looking at, because we understand, and that number can increase. It could decrease, actually. It's just, I think a lot of it has to do with our media out there. And, right now there's a lot of talk about getting kids back into school. And so we'll see what that looks like. But knowing that, we know that at the primary, we're at 50 students, which puts like two cohorts of 25 students. That's at capacity, so that we know if we need to make those changes, we might need to assign another fully remote teacher to a current grade level or several grade levels, or who knows? We don't know that yet until we get those surveys back. But in the event we do, just speaking with Mrs. Bailey earlier, she is very sensitive to the fact that we'll look at and prioritize students that have already undergone a lot of changes of teachers, to not make sure that doesn't happen again. That's her first priority. And students that are newly going into the fully remote model, those will be the students that receive newer teachers. So she understands that. She doesn't want to see a child have a third or a fourth teacher, and wants to avoid that at all costs if possible. And just, bottom line is that, there's no handbook for this. Nobody went to school to learn how to do this, to conduct schools during a global pandemic. We are the first to admit that we do not have all the answers. We're not perfect, but we are very transparent in our process. And I think that's something to be said about Maryvale. We're proud about that. We're making decisions based on students' needs, academically, social, emotionally. And we also understand that change is difficult for everybody. everybody involved in this process, parents and the district, especially when we're making important decisions that could affect the health of others. We understand that. We hope that and know that most of our parents, if not all, do understand this. And just like they are, we are doing the best we can with what we have right now, with the changes that come upon us on a daily basis. Something could change tomorrow. We could move, and I don't want to say this, I don't want to jinx us, but we could move into the red zone tomorrow. And then that would mean that we have to test 30% of our students instead of 20% of our students. Well, that I know the struggle might be, we have to get more consent forms back because we don't have the level of consent forms we need for 30% testing today. We could have that tomorrow. So these are all just different factors. And again, I can't say it enough about the remarkable planning and organization that our schools have taken on to make this successful for our students. I'm excited about the secondary students moving into the hybrid model on January 4th because I saw how successful on November 2nd it was at our elementary level. And not only that, but I saw the smiles on our staff and our students' faces, and it was enough for everything to know that it's going to be all right. We're going to get through this. We know that this is something that is challenging. We all understand it, but we all have to have, I think from the beginning, somebody said, patience and, we have to understand we're all coming from different places, and we have to just know that this is ever changing and understand everybody's coming with a different lens. As a parent, as a district administrator, as a teacher, as a principal, it's all coming from a different lens, and we'll get through it. And I know that on January 4th, when we get our secondary back in, it's going to feel different in Maryvale, a good feeling. So
For sure.
sorry for taking so much time. I just really wanted to explain some of the things behind the scenes, because not everybody gets to hear that all the time. Everything that's happening behind the scenes.
Thank you for that.
Definitely. Thank you. Can I ask a quick question though?
Sure.
Can parents at this point, like if they didn't want to send their kids back for hybrid on Monday, can they choose to do that?
Yes. So they can continue to keep their child fully remote. Is that what
Okay.
you're asking? Yep. Until.
Yes.
Yes.
Now,
They
if
just
they
need to
do,
contact the building principal, though. That's really important that they contact the building principal to let them know that.
right. If you're a parent that does not want to send your child back from December 14th to December 23rd, you can keep them remote, but they will be asynchronous for that time, mostly because we don't have time to make scheduling changes that would be needed. Some parents have indicated to me that they're going to keep their children home during, before the break, but return them on January 4th. So there are different situations across the district, and but they do have that choice at this point. And parents that want to switch from hybrid to remote in January will have the opportunity to indicate that via surveys that the principals are going to send out.
Mr. D'Angelo, I have a question. So kind of at a global level within the district, if a parent has a question regarding hybrid versus virtual versus, morning or afternoon or whatever the case, what's the best recommendation for them as a parent, me as a parent, or any of us as parents to do? Who should we ask? Who should we talk to?
The principal.
Okay.
First and foremost, your principal. The teachers. I know teachers are getting a lot of questions. Sometimes, sometimes teachers, they're working so hard. They're not looking at that global view of things, and that's understandable. So parents should definitely go to the principal. And if they don't get the answers that they're looking for, they can come to me. But they can also come to me at any time.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank
But
you.
James, also, if it's a lot of times I'll get some calls, from parents, some issues that they're having in the building, and they haven't gone to the teacher They haven't gone to the principal yet. They come directly to me. And a lot of times the people that are best suited to solve a problem are the people that are, they got their hands in it and working at it. So parents should definitely contact the principals regarding questions about, what you referenced.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about in the instructional aspect of things? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Giangreco. We appreciate that. Mrs. Burke is here, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about where we stand as a district with regard to our testing in our lab. We're an educational institution. I've put this in a lot of my communications, and I'm really proud of the fact that with less than a month's notice, we figure out how to become a diagnostic testing lab. It's the work of Mrs. Burke. It's the work of the nurses, and really a lot of other people in the district to make that happen under such short notice. There were so many steps involved in making this happen, in securing our tests and the licenses and the reporting mechanisms and the processes that we're going to use to conduct these tests. And I really have to give kudos to Mrs. Burke, who's been working nonstop on this and many other issues. We've had lots of conversations about this over the past few weeks, and we're proud to say that we're ready to make this happen. As I announced today to the community, the last thing that we were waiting for was delivery of our tests, and that did happen. We have our tests. We conducted trial runs. I guess we were required by the state to do a trial run, like a small sample size, to show that we know how to administer the tests. We did that today, and we're ready to move forward with the process. And Mrs. Burke, if you could just maybe before we open up for discussion and questions, could you talk to the board about the process of so how is testing going to look, from how is it randomized to how, when someone's selected for a test, what's going to happen? How is it going to look for them?
Sure, thank you. And I also want to thank Mr. D'Angelo because he has been in every single micro and macro decision process. There's a lot of things that go into this, as he said, and we did this in such a short period of time. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to go through a couple of the steps before I go through, if that's okay, Mr. D'Angelo, to go through after they're selected, but to talk a little bit about why it took us up to a month. And this was communicated very well and transparent through all of Mr. D'Angelo's messages to the community. But the first step was for us to obtain our limited service laboratory license. And as an educational institute, there were a lot of things that we had to do that were not within our control. So we had to work with our medical director, who had to work with the medical community and the Erie County Department of Health, because school districts aren't laboratories. So there's a lot of things we're not set up to do that even some doctors' offices are not set up to do. So even some family practices don't have their own limited service laboratory license. They send their patients out to centers such as Quest because there's so many steps involved. So we worked tirelessly on obtaining our own LSL, and we have submitted that, and we have not heard from the state yet if we for that portion. But luckily, Erie County Department of Health did step up, and they were able to help us become a LSL through their licensure. So we are under the Erie County Department of Health's CLIA number.
And I should just note that happened 1 week ago today.
Yes.
So a lot of the stuff that happened in getting up and running as a lab just happened in this from a week ago today.
Correct. So once we were able to obtain that CLIA number, we were able to order our test specific to our district. And then after we ordered our test, we thought, okay, we're ready to go. And then we found out, no, we have to have access to an ECLAIRS system, which is the electronic system. It's a medical system where you document when you are given a medical test. And it's a very secured system. And so you have to apply through the health commerce system, which we have already have an idea of the school district, because we do have to upload all of our immunizations and our BMI yearly. So we do, as the director of nurses, I have a subscription, I guess, to this health commerce center, but we did not have the ECLAIRS. So we had to put an application in to have the ECLAIRS reporting system. We were granted this testing, a trial run of that, and that's what we were able to do today. So we had to do a test, put it into that medical system. So now I understand why people have to go to school to become medical reporters, because there's a lot involved in that. A lot of new, I thought the education system had a lot of acronyms. The medical system has even more acronyms. So we have to upload it into that system. And within 30 minutes of uploading it, we got a perfect score. So we were given our live reporting access. So that's the kind of the background of becoming the lab. Then we had to work with our medical director on training our nurses on how to give the test. There's a series of things we had to do. They had to watch a video. They had to show different competencies in order to being able to test. So that then we had to we realized there was more PPE that we had to provide for testing rather than just assessing like in the nurse's office. So we had to order. So thank you to Dr. London and his staff, because I was like, find this now, order this, go. And they did all yesterday, and everything will be in on Monday. We actually found a company that the president of the company was a Maryvale grad of 71. So that was pretty neat. He called me, the president himself, and said, oh my goodness, yes, we can help you. So that was great. And then today we did a logistical setup. So that took all of our clerical staff, our principals, our nurses, our medical director, Ernie and his staff, Charlie and his staff, to set up the actual lab of what it's going to look like when we test our students on Wednesdays. So I want to thank everyone. They are sending me pictures of how they can put hand sanitizing stations up on every, put these boards together. It's really a huge team effort. So I really want to thank everyone. And if I forget somebody, I'm sorry. Then we did a test round today. So I'm happy to say I'm negative. I was the testee. The nurses practiced on me, and I came out negative. So that was great. We had to get a standing order. So I wanted to say this publicly in the session because our standing order for testing is only for screening. And so when our students come back to hybrid, if they go down to the nurse's office and they have a symptom, we are not ordered, we cannot test those students so that they can stay in school. The testing cards that the BioNext Now testing that we have is only for screening. So it is not for students that are symptomatic or staff that are symptomatic to test to see if they can stay in school. We're not that type of organization. We're not that type of lab. And the tests that we have on hand aren't for that purpose. So I think that's important to note. So for parents, if you do get a call from the nurse that your child is symptomatic and you have to go to your healthcare provider, that is to get a different type of test. The test that we have now is a screening test and only a screening test. And that's the only order we have from our medical director in order to provide that. We had to obtain consent, and I know Mr. D'Angelo has been talking to the community about that. So we have to have that consent on hand. We also created a test form, and this is really just so parents know when they come in if they come in with their child, there's some pieces that they'll have to fill out that day. It's just your address, your phone number, a contact information right on there, and then the nurses will fill out the bottom half. So it's almost like when you go to the doctor's office, you fill out the top half, they fill out the results on the bottom half of a form. And it's HIPAA compliant, and it's for tracking purposes. Also we had to randomize. So all of the people who are in consent went into an Excel spreadsheet, and there was a randomizer to select the students and staff for the first month testing window. So that was completed this afternoon. And so letters will be mailed electronically will go home electronically on Monday. If you are randomly selected to be the student or staff for that first round of testing. On that letter, it'll explain in detail. For students, there are 4 different dates on Wednesdays to come in. It also has the option in there and directions if you opt to go and get your test from your own medical primary care doctor, or if you want to go to a well now yourself, you can do that. And there's directions on that letter to send in the results of that test if you don't want to be tested on campus. There will be a link for a Sign Up Genius. It's a software system that allows parents to pick a date and time. Because we're only having 4 students in the testing lab at a time. Well, there could be a possible overlap, but 4 a possible 8 students at a time, because 4 would be checking in and the other 4 would be testing, and then they leave. So a student, I'll walk you through. Once you receive the letter, you click on the link to sign up for an appointment time. Then there'll be a map with that letter as well to show parents where they could come on campus and park. It'll be on that Wednesday where is all remote day. They'll come to the high school. They'll come into the door closest to the high school gym. They will check in with the clerical staff to go over that important information.
And I just want to interject. That door is labeled on the map that's going to be provided.
Yes, and there'll be signage also outside,
right,
for people to know when they come in. Actually, before you hit the clerical station, you will have that COVID screener. So you'll get your temperature checked, and you'll be asked those 4 questions that are our daily screener questions. As long as your answer is no to all of those questions, you can move forward to the clerical station, where they're going to check your consent form. They're going to give that parent that test form along with a label that's just your child's name. And then you go to the nursing station. You'll be there to get your swab. It's not all the way up. It's the lower nasal swab. Then you will leave. We will process the results right there. And if you have a positive result, you will get a call from the school nurse. There is a script that was sent out today through Erie County Department of Health. They will also get a follow-up call from Erie County Department of Health contact tracers, but if you have a positive test from our testing site, you will get your direction to isolate, and then your family will quarantine from our nurses first, and then they will follow up. It may take a day or 2. There is a lag of contact tracing, and that's why they gave us the directive to give the isolation and quarantine orders, standing orders from Erie County Department of Health, because we are operating under their license. All results will be recorded to the Eclair system and uploaded to both New York State Department of Health and Erie County Department of Health within 24 hours of our testing. And if there's a negative if you're negative, you will receive an email by the end of that day with the negative results. So if you don't hear immediately from a phone call, you can presume that you're negative or inconclusive, because there's an opportunity for the test to be inconclusive, and you would get that result as well. Okay, I think I went through the whole process. Are there any questions?
Do we ever get? Oh, go ahead, Jason.
I was going to ask, when you brought up the inconclusive part, you know, how does that get recorded then? Does it go against because we can do what the county is at right now? So say we're at 9% right now, we got to stay below 9%, correct?
So if we have 9 positive results out of the 20%, then we would have to close.
So how does the inconclusive add
it does
into
not
that?
count against us. It's just part of the 20%.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did we ever get an explanation from the Erie County Department of Health of why they took so long to give us a number to work under when other counties were already doing that for their schools?
No, and I guess the only thing I could say is they probably had to check, just like our medical director and medical staff had to in all of Erie County. I was on a call with the Erie County medical director and the Erie County Department of Health and medical directors from all of our regional schools, and they all had to check on a lot of different things to make sure that, liability insurance, and because we're all under Dr. Gail Bernstein. It's her license that is, so there may have been things that she had to check to make sure she could have multiple offsites. I don't know, but that's what I'm assuming, that they had to make sure all their ducks were in a row in order to have multiple offsite testing sites.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I could just say, I want to reassure the community that, yes, we set up this lab within, a month's time, but it's safe, and we know how to run it, and we know how to operate it, and no one should look at the time frame with which we created it to be an indication that it's haphazard or anything like that. It is not. I completely trust the process, and I think that again, I commend the work that you did, Mrs. Burke, and the nurses and Dawn Springer, our medical director. It's fantastic, and it's ready to go. The other thing I want to say is that, contrasting with the start of the school year, the end of this summer, the start of the school year, there is now data, experiential data, that shows that schools are safer than the communities at large, especially with the mitigation factors that we have in place, the desk shields, the traffic patterns in the schools, the hand sanitizers, the Virex, the limited cohorts, the limited numbers of students in the classrooms, the controlled movement. The data now is showing that these schools are safer than going to Walmart or Wegmans or a place like that. And it's this reason that we're confident in opening back up the hybrid at this time. So I wanted to say those two things before we open up for more questions or conversation. Is there anything that we can answer for the board at this point, or it's a lot of information and a lot of our heads are swimming in it, right, Joelle? Okay.
Well, I know this is a lot of work for the nurses, so we thank them very much to help our students so that they can come back.
They did a good job, being involved in the process and kind of advising how things should be set up. And I think it was them that suggested that we test the students on the Wednesdays and the staff on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and that we utilize the high school gym as our site. And so they've had a lot of input in the process. I know that's not something that they're used to doing, but we have full confidence in our nurses. Okay, well, thank you, Mrs. Burke. Appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you.
For moving on with the consent agenda items, I would recommend the board approve the financial, non-personnel consent agenda items 1 through 3 as submitted.
Can I have a motion?
James Olmosen.
Jen will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now I would recommend that the board approve the personnel consent agenda item on the agenda as presented.
Can I have a motion?
Number 1.
I'll make a motion. Jason.
James will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend the board approve the separation agreement between a tenured teacher and the district as presented.
Can I have a motion?
A motion.
Ron.
Who is second?
Jen.
I'll second Jen.
Jen? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
I don't believe we have any updates for Erie County School Boards, do we? Any resident input, Sheena?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Real quick on that one, resident input and actually the beginning part, resident input. They're both resident input. Can we maybe in some of our emails that go out, list the contact email if parents do want to get with the board or ask questions or make comments or whatever, just
Sure.
so that people are aware of it?
Yeah, Sheena, that's a good idea. When we post the link to the board meeting and even the board agenda, why don't we post also the email address that they can submit these comments while we're virtual? That's a great idea, James. Thank you.
Yeah,
Very
no problem at all.
Anything else? Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Jason?
James will second.
James is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.